we kind of divided the questions into two parts. So we received a lot of questions about principles of life and about the textbook and the resources and teaching with the book. And then we received a lot of questions about AP Biology and the exam and pacing your course. So we split the two questions into groups, and we're going to go through them separately. So the first question we have is the new textbook aligned to the new standards? How does it correlate to the 4 big ideas? How do you determine what illustrative examples to put in the textbook? And does POL 2E contain enough data to sufficiently smack students in the face?
I can take that last question. Yes. Yes, there is plenty of data to smack students in the face. In the face. I was lucky enough to work on the ecology chapters with Franklin Bell, and he and I were just, we were actually had to kind of pick and choose the data sets that were available in the chapters to write lessons around them. So that was one of the things that struck me about POL Edition 1 was the fact that there was quantitative analysis with every concept and really helped teachers and students think about, what types of questions to ask in terms of understanding patterns that emerge from data sets.
And again, the beauty of text, as far as I'm concerned from a teacher's perspective, is that you've got everything you need right there at your fingertips. So as Ryan was saying, there's a lot of data analysis and, analyzing data that you don't have to go out and search for anymore, I guess is what I'm saying. So it makes it really, really easy to have your students actually perform the analysis.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's not just the alignment to the big ideas, it's also the science practices and the fact that there is so many, there are so many data sets for students to look at and to analyze and to play with. That tells you right there that there was a lot of careful thought and planning in going into selecting those data sets and how they could be used to teach not only the content but the science practices as well, because all of y'all know to learn science, you got to do science. It's not just reading the facts in a textbook, it's playing with data, it's collecting data, it's analyzing data, and the fact that, we're trying to teach students science practices through this is also really important.
And in regards to how do you determine which illustrative examples go in, what we did was essentially took the AP framework, which came out 3 years ago, and then did basically a term search as a put POL second edition into a PDF and just shot it out there looking for a specific term. And whenever an idea or a piece of text came up that matched an LO, we just set up a bulleted list and we thought, okay, clearly this little piece of content in the text matches exactly what the College Board is telling folks that they should be teaching. So let's not only highlight that, but then let's work to build some interesting questions or build a data set around that question. I worked on the chapter on a controlled gene expression. There's a good little bit about how plants essentially up-regulate, down-regulate certain genes, and that actually ends up in the curriculum framework for some reason. I'm not sure why, but it happened to match. And so sure enough, I was able to sort of call teachers' attention to how plants go about dealing with heat stress and water stress, and it's just right there in the text. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but basically, if it was in the curriculum framework and it was in POL Edition 2, we made sure that teachers know about that.
And let me just add to what Ryan said, because I did a lot of with Pat Moat, I did a lot of the chapters, animal physiology and the body systems, and one of the things was that we all know some of the systems are out of the scope of the sequence, yet the illustrative examples often fall in those systems. So we made sure when that illustrative example might come in a chapter you would not think to actually cover, where it fit in an earlier chapter, say maybe transport of molecules across the membrane or water potential or something like that. We would make sure that teachers understood that that illustrative example was better explained, or more thoroughly explained, I should say, in a chapter that you might not expect it to be in. So I think, again, we did a lot of work on trying to show teachers where those illustrative examples could be placed.
Our next question is, some information seems to be marked as required in the teacher position, but is not indicated on the curriculum framework document from the College Board in the same detail as presented in the text. How did you determine if a section is outside the scope?
Well, I know for a fact. I'm sorry, I keep jumping in. That was an editorial decision by Jen Vandersel and Paul Phillips, and they essentially redacted much of the material. So if it wasn't part of the curriculum framework, it didn't get a lot of heavy play. I think that shows up a lot in the chapters on genomics and controlled gene expression,
Right.
things that are really interesting. Excuse me, but well beyond the scope of the course. In fact, I don't want to get too much into how the sausage was made, but if you dig deep into some of those chapters on gene expression, the authors wrote, you probably remember in your microbiology class how you did this and this. And I was like, no, it's an AP edition. These are high school kids that have never had micro.
Right.
And you, for everybody on the call, our colleagues, you have to recognize that this text it has an audience, which is, college professors buying a book for their first year introductory bio classes, but our AP classes should be similar in scope and sequence. So the authors were writing for a college audience. It was our job to sort of truncate, help folks, help folks see the connections to AP bio, and then try and, surgically point folks to the stuff that really matters. But go ahead.
And if I can jump in, because I worked on the chapters, a chunk of chapters that were actually completely outside of the scope of our curriculum. I worked on the diversity chapters. And as y'all know, if you look through our framework, there's not anything that's indicative of, the old March Through the Kingdoms. And those happen to be the chapters that my writing partner and I worked on. And so where we tried to focus our efforts were on, developing science practices, because those things can still be used as examples, but, kids aren't going to need to know what are all the phyla of protists, what are all the phyla of fungi, and stuff like that. And so what we tried to focus on was, okay, well, what kind of skills can we teach these kids by using these kingdoms as examples? And if teachers want to use them, fantastic. If not, hey, that's fine too. But those, knowing that the primary audience of the textbook is a college professor, those chapters still have to be inside.
And really, when you look at that annotated teacher's edition, you'll see all the stuff which is outside the scope is redacted or it's grayed out. For a first or second year teacher, and I'm sure there's a few on the call right now, that's a godsend. Essentially, you look at that couple page spread and you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't looked at this since undergrad or grad school. Rest easy knowing that that's not something that you're intended to uncover. You should focus on more essential stuff like bioenergetics and interactions between interactions in ecosystems or cell signaling, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a moment. But I really like the way, even though I love all this stuff, it's nice that a lot of the more high-end stuff is redacted, and I hope that makes sense.